Well, welcome,
First
welcome,
podcast
welcome,
together.
welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, so I am here with, I call him the great Aman, but I'll allow him to introduce himself. Welcome to another episode of I Learn, I Teach podcast. I'm CD Thompson, and who am I talking to today?
Speaking with Aman Bajaj, and I've been studying with you for about a semester or two now. So
Yes.
It's been great knowing you. And I think we ended up discussing about all these great books that we have had the chance to read over time. And I think it's great that we have a platform where you can share ideas.
Okay. All right. So when you mentioned this book, I don't know if you remember my reaction. I'm like, yes, I read it to a certain point, but then I said that, why does it? I feel as if this book is turning me into a monster, meaning it is giving me thoughts about manipulation and all of that. And then you're like, no. Read the entire book so that you understand what the full book means. And I can see why it would, be easy for persons to think that I think this is a dangerous book, but it's not dangerous at all. It's just some laws that Robert Greene came up with, and we're going to discuss a few of them today. All right.
Sure.
But first, before we jump into the laws, what is your, because your review of books are so incredible. What was your initial thought when you read this book?
I think the 48 Laws of Power, you have to understand it's a quintessential book when it comes to understanding how you work in, say, a challenging atmosphere or any work atmosphere today. And you also have to go back to why is it that Robert Greene even wrote this book in the first place. He was a guy who had struggled for about 30-40 years into different kind of businesses, different kinds of work. He had tried working in different industries, and he came across the same problems as, say, you and I do most of the time, right? We don't encounter a problem of skill, we encounter a problem of dynamics.
Yes.
The way office dynamics work, the way people dynamics
Oh,
work.
yes.
Especially in an atmosphere where people are supposed to perform. And this is something that he started encountering very early in his career, even through his teenage years where he got his first job. And his entire idea of writing this book, he's one of those authors who became successful later in his life. So you really have to understand where he's coming from, the kind of experience that he's coming from.
Yes.
He failed like 20 jobs before writing that book.
Listen, 20 jobs. And we give ourselves so much grief when we fail at one thing. But can you imagine, and I'm sure there are a multitude of people who would have failed and failed and failed and failed and failed. And I have an episode coming that speaks about failure and the beauty of failure. But that's for another one. 20 jobs. But he kept going.
Yeah.
He kept going.
And eventually he realized that, okay, maybe there are some unsaid things, the way, say, a dynamic operates. And the way he went about learning about these dynamics is that he went back to the history books. He saw what others had written, especially during the time when kings existed, dynasties existed, empires were built. Right? One of the great examples, one of the great lessons that he had learned was from Niccolo Machiavelli.
Yes,
And
I remember.
his books, The Prince, right? So he really went on to understand, okay, how is it that kings and queens and their courtiers, especially since during the Renaissance and even in the 1600s and the 1700s, you had these courts where people kind of convened to discuss about topics to service the king or the queen. And he went on to learn from them how they manage their power, how they manage their dynamic.
Yes.
And he came up with this beautiful insight that power, though one of the most intangible of things,
Yes.
is an entity in itself.
Of course.
And it exists.
Of
It
course.
exists right now
Yes.
between you and I.
Yes.
It existed from the time that you were born
Mm.
with your parents.
Yes.
And even with any person that you meet with.
Yes, that's true. All right, I'm going to touch the first law because the first law, never outshine the master. I remember when I read this chapter, and it was about, as much as he was not trying to show off his assets and anything like that, his master felt as if, hey, what are you doing? In the story that he told,
Right.
what are you doing? Why would you invite me to this mansion, although as innocent as it was for him to celebrate the master? It felt as if he was showing off. Let's dive into that. Never outshine the master. And I'm going to just read a little thing that it says. Always make those above you feel comfortably superior. In your desire to please or impress them, do not go too far in displaying your talents, or you might accomplish the opposite. Inspire fear and insecurity. Make your masters appear more brilliant than they are, and you will attain the heights of power. Let's talk about that first power, that first law. Never outshine the master. What do you think?
I think this particular law kind of runs parallel to us coming of age, not only in the industry but just in life.
In life, yes.
And realizing that the beauty or the chances that our youth gave made us feel extremely okay that I can achieve anything that I want,
Mhm.
and I can pretty much outshine everything that there is to do out there. I can be one of those athletes. I can be maybe a CEO. And while it is important to have ambition, it is also to remember that everybody in this world shares that ambition.
Absolutely. You know, I wish I knew about this law when I was younger. I'm gonna go into the teaching moment now. Because I was naturally quick and smart, I used to especially in my earlier in my career, I would try so hard to please my superiors that sometimes it appears as if I was doing too much. In my mind, innocently, I wasn't, because I wanted them to look good. But I would have had, persons in my leadership in early years who never saw it that way.
Yeah.
And they felt as if I was threatening their position or whatever it is, and it never sat well with them. But but in my defense, I thought I was doing it innocently. But when I read this chapter in this book, I was like, oh wow, I can see now, looking back, how what we do, and this is not to say that anybody should dim their light, because I am one who will tell you, never dim your light for anybody. However, when you are playing certain games, and there are certain parts of life that I say is a game. When you're playing the game of corporate, for example, and you know where you want to go in corporate, it is not good to play checkers, play chess. And sometimes in playing chess, there are certain things that you have to, I don't want to say become hypocritical about, but you know where you want to go. And that is what this book is saying right here. you know, you have the power to go on. Yeah. So, as much as I was innocent in wanting to do well for the company and for my boss, Sis, at times, it was taken for me being, you know, a little bit too much. What is the danger? What danger do you see in, or let me not even talk about the danger. Let me ask this question. How then do you find that sweet little balance between not dumbing down who you are as an individual, but at the same time not showing up your master, so to speak? And we know what master means. It doesn't mean that it's a slave. Master meaning, you know, your leader or whoever, your boss or whoever it is.
Your alleged boss, let's just say.
Yes.
Someone who's supposed to guide you.
So, supposed to.
Yeah.
Because some of them.
I think the mistakes of the youth are extremely necessary to get to the point where you realize that you need something like this in your future. I think what happens in our youth should not be hindered by books like these at the time. This is a book that you can only turn to when the time comes, when the right time comes. When you have encountered enough number of problems at your workplace to realize that, okay, maybe I need a different strategy now.
Yes.
And that is why I think the light of the youth needs to shine when you're still young, in your 20s, you're just starting out. You need to just go out there and just do. Make the mistakes that you need to. This is the book that comes to you when you have already committed those mistakes. And that is where you realize that there's more to this than what met the eye.
Yes.
And if I were to absorb these laws, really understand them, I think I'll be able to channel my energies a lot better.
Okay.
Than to waste them at something
At
which is
something.
unnecessary.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So it's not for us then telling people, hey, live by the laws. No. Read them. As I said, you know, there are going to be moments that you can pick those, the lessons from what he's trying to convey to us, and that we can apply them to different scenarios in different ways. And I think that's a challenge that most people who read this book, that I would have, you know, and it for a little while, it had got me there as well, where I'm like, okay, I think I need to stop because I can see where this book is going to cause me to become this evil person.
Yeah.
But it's not, because, okay, moving on to another law, because these laws made people, and I'm going to show you why.
Just before we do, speaking of the first law, I think my encounter with the first law was so very personal that
Yes.
I feel like I would like to share this story.
Yes. Yes.
I think growing up, I'd always been one of those people who was regarded highly, say, by teachers or by relatively, you know, people who are relatively elder to me. I always had friends who were relatively elder to me. I had some teachers who considered me their pet.
Yeah.
You know,
Teacher's pet. Teacher's pet. I remember I was
it's
teased.
a beautiful situation to be in.
Not all the time,
Right.
especially in Jamaica.
Yeah. So by the time I started working, this is how I approached work. Right. I was so conditioned to that idea that I wanted to be, say, one of my boss's pet, or say one of the CEO's pet. I wanted to come across as the preferred one, or the chosen one,
The golden
like
calf.
the prodigal son, right? Like the prodigal employee. And by the time I actually went into an atmosphere which was highly competitive and very challenging when it came to the work, there were thousands of people working in the company. I was working in a relatively smaller department then, and I met this new person that I gelled really well with, right? Really well. Like our principles aligned. And I really thought that perhaps working with this person is going to be the most effective for me, or the most productive for me and for the company. And we went on to create a very good rapport. But what I didn't realize that I was playing the same prodigal son, prodigal employee kind of a role, wherein I did become the pet, but I was also the one of the first one in line to get sacrificed when the time came.
Oh.
Right? So you have to be really careful
Yes,
how
yes.
the dynamic that you share with your supposed master, because you have to remember that their sense of peace and their sense of comfort in regards to you, the up and coming you, has to be given a lot of importance. And that dynamic is something that you create over a period of time.
Yes, of course.
It's not something that you create in the first 6 months. It's not something that you create out of sheer skill and sheer hard work. It's something that you brew, like a mulled wine.
Yes.
Right?
You brew it over time.
Take a year and a half. Show yourself as someone who's persistent and who can survive in the organization.
Yes.
As against someone who's here to make a mark too quickly.
Too quickly.
Yeah.
Slow down sometimes for safety. That was that was a slogan back home in Jamaica. All right. What made me start thinking now about the dangers when I first read this book was the second law. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Be wary of friends. They will betray you more quickly, for they are easily aroused to envy. They also become spoiled and tyrannical. But hire a former enemy and he will be more loyal than a friend because he has more to prove. In fact, you have more to fear from friends than from enemies. If you have no enemies, find a way to make them. Listen, I mean, this book. Anyway, talk to me about this law. What was your, when you read that chapter for the first time, what came to mind? Because this was a chapter that kind of started to get me, it started making me think,
Yeah.
okay.
This is a dangerous book.
Yes, it is a dangerous book when I first read it. Yeah.
I think you have to, first of all, what it says, it beautifully puts across that don't be afraid to have enemies.
Yes.
You're not supposed to surround yourself only with friends. Life is more than just that, right? While friends can make you extremely comfortable, they can make you feel at home.
Yes.
They can make you feel like yourself. Complacency also comes
With that.
Eventually,
Absolutely.
you surround yourself with comfort enough, complacency sets in. That goes with anything. That goes with work, that goes with pleasure, that goes with friends. And what an enemy can do for you is so much more than what a friend can ever do for you.
Unpack that for me, Aman, please.
Yeah.
Please,
So,
because I can now hear my viewers. But I want people around me who supports me and they tell me what I need to hear and I want that and I want that. Unpack that for me, because I am of that same view that you need those controversial people who go against some of the things that you want to do, because not everything that you want to do is good for you. Have those people in your life that will tell you no, and don't think of them as, oh, you're hating and you're a hater and you're a hater. No. Unpack that for me.
Yeah, I think you should go with like the Pareto principle in this whole equation. Like, yes, you need to have like 80% of your surrounding has to be with the right kind of people, and that's
Absolutely.
very true.
Absolutely.
But the top 20%. So I'm saying that, let's say, have one or two enemies. Have one or two good enemies that you respect. And why is that? An enemy can keep you or make you in something that you never imagined you could be, right? It will put you on the line. It will take you on the edge of your seat it'll also make you very conscious about your actions
Mhm.
and what you do, say, in an organization,
Mm-hmm.
right? An enemy will also generate some kind of conflict in
Of
you.
course.
And that conflict is like you know this. Like
Mhm.
conflict is the most important source when it comes to moving forward.
Yeah. To
Because
propel
when
it.
there is thesis,
Mhm.
there is an antithesis,
Mhm.
and then you finally have synthesis, and that's how you move
Move
forward.
forward, yes.
You need to have someone opposing your views,
Oh,
opposing
yes.
your ideas, because they feel that and they have the grounds to feel that they're right in what they're
Of
saying.
course. They should have their own opinions.
Correct. And this amalgamation helps build not only you, but also your enemy.
Absolutely.
And that is how both of you end up moving forward.
You know, rivalry. Rivalry is such a good thing. I remember back in the day, I had a rival because I used to do the performing arts. And my group was known for, because I used to choreograph a lot and we used to do competitions. And for those who know me, I'm extremely competitive when it comes to putting out the very best piece of work. And I remember I was, raining and whatever until I met someone who became my biggest rival. But then, after we passed that conflict of rivalry, we collaborated on one piece together, and it was like a masterpiece.
It sounds amazing.
You know? And I remember the first time I saw their work at a competition, I remember going back to the drawing board and I'm like, okay, we reign supreme in this area, but we just stepped into another dimension. And it forced me to do more research. I became better because of that rivalry. I never once shied away from it because I knew at some point, and let me tell you, I remember first year I went up against them, I lost. Second year I went up against them, I lost. But every time I went up, I remember the last time when I swept the entire competition, and she came from backstage and she's like, listen, I respect you for never ever giving up, and that's how we should see rivalry sometimes.
Yeah.
Because as you say, it forces you, unless you're the type of individual now who sees a rivalry and say, you know what, let me give up because I will never do what they do, so let me not bother. You're not challenging yourself. Challenge yourself. See that rivalry. See them for who they are. But it should force you to be better.
And respect competition.
Absolutely.
I don't think just because we are in the 21st century and just because there is so much more leniency which is provided while growing up in the young years, also when you people keep telling this to you that competition is not the way to go. Just hone yourself, hone your own skill. I think competition, finding a good adversary is one of the most important things, and find them in small things, not necessarily in a large scale competition. Find them in a class. I mean, let's take an example of the class that we were in quite recently. Just having another person in class who does
And there was another competition, especially about my group.
just having another person in class who perhaps does a good presentation makes you want to do your presentation much better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
I agree with you. Wow. It's a lot to unpack, eh? I mean, who would have thought that I'd be talking about this book? I want to read something from this chapter that really got me thinking. It says authority.
okay.
Know how to use enemies for your own profit. You must learn to grab a sword not by its blade, which would cut you, but by the handle, which allows you to defend yourself. The wise man profits more from his enemies than a fool from his friends. And that from Balthazar Gracian, the 1600s, when he wrote that. The wise man profits more from his enemies than a fool from his friends. Wow. That's really good. Really, really good. Ready for number 3? Law number 3. Conceal your intentions. Keep people off balance and in the dark by never revealing the purpose behind your actions. If they have no clue what you are up to, they cannot prepare a defense. Guide them afar enough down the wrong path. Envelope them in enough smoke, and by the time they realize your intentions, it will be too late. Why does it sound like I'm going on the battlefield?
Yeah. There are two ways of looking at this particular law.
Mm-hmm.
One is look at it in a very straightforward way.
Mm.
I was having a discussion with a friend when I was trying to inculcate this habit in her, where she had a habit of really speaking out loud about her emotions and about how her day had went.
Mm-hmm.
And while it is absolutely respectable when a person comes to you and tells you about your day and tells you about your feelings, you have to realize that usually that person would end up doing that with a bunch of other people too.
Yeah.
It's not just you.
That is so.
It may be her adversary, where she's speaking out loud as to about her grand plans, about her emotions, and where she wants to be in the next year. And that information can often be misutilized by someone who's, say, not on your side, right? I'm not just saying this because you always have to be thinking that you're on the battlefield. I think just being very careful with your words and being articulate, measured, also helps you in return. It tells you that you're not just a bunch of words, but you're also action. You're also temperance, you're also patience, you're so many more things than just speaking, right? The other way to look at it is there are people who do speak a lot, who do speak a lot about their plans, who do speak a lot about where they want to be and what they feel, but that all is misdirection. A very good example of that is Donald J. Trump. What you see him speaking on the dais, in front of a crowd, in say an assembly, is very different from the way he's going to act. That guy is an extremely hardworking president. But what you never realize is his intentions, because he's beautiful when it comes to misdirection.
Okay.
Now that can be looked at as a negative attribute, understandably, and it may even be. But I'm saying at the end of the day, he did win the presidency.
Of course, yes.
Election
Yeah,
twice,
of course.
right? So that's how. These are the two ways of going about it. I personally feel that just being really articulate with your thoughts and ideas and feelings, and being a little more measured, is far more effective.
Absolutely.
Because it helps you anchor more onto action than anything else. And the other way is obviously misdirection, which some people can choose depending upon what their surrounding is, right? Yeah.
I'm gonna read something from that. Use the smoke screens to disguise your actions. Deception is always the best strategy, but the best deceptions require a screen of smoke to distract people's attention from your real purpose. The bland exterior, like the unreliable poker face, is often the perfect smoke screen, hiding your intentions behind the comfortable and familiar. If you lead the sucker down a familiar path, he won't catch on when you lead him into a trap.
Good.
Jeez. Jeez. Wow. Interesting. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Anything else you wanna just say about this chapter, this law, before I move on to the fourth law? Kind of ties into the third one that says always say less than necessary.
Yeah.
I think we could just move right into that too, because to go to the point that you made, sometimes, especially in the world of where we are in social media, and everybody has a phone and wants to go viral, and let me say whatever it is. Sometimes we have to be very, very careful what it is that we share.
Yeah.
When you are trying to impress people with words, the more you say, the more common you appear, and the less in control. Even if you are saying something banal, it will seem original if you make it vague, open-ended, and sphinx-like. Powerful people impress and intimidate by saying less. The more you say, the more likely you are to say something foolish.
I think a very good example of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, The Weeknd, the singer, when he started becoming popular, so this is how his identity was set in the market. Right? So music industry is a very competitive industry.
Absolutely.
And you really have to understand how you enter it, right? Most of the people like to be themselves, or at least a version of themselves. Abel Tesfaye, who is by the way from Toronto, decided that he wanted to have not exactly a pseudonym, but a persona that he wanted to project. And he came up with the name The Weeknd. And that was also a stage name that he used to use many, many years prior to actually getting inside the industry. If you look at his marketing strategy to kind of explode in the music industry, was to be a man of very few words.
Very few words.
Very few words.
He was not all over the place for real. That's true.
You never had him speaking in a music award or TMZ or for that matter even MTV. He was one of those people who would engage with the media, but at the same time
He was very strategic with it.
he held the control.
Yeah.
And why was it that he held control? Because everybody just wanted to hear what he had to say, because he hardly ever said anything.
Yes.
And how did he create that interest? By saying hardly anything. People just wanted, a phrase from him outside of his songs, and that is what created, a sensation. So I think it can be a very good way to capture attention. Also, when you're in a group discussion, when you're having a couple of people, maybe you're sitting with family, maybe you're talking about decisions, maybe you're sitting with a bunch of colleagues. Having the last say, just waiting till the time everybody has put in their views. There are always those who are too enthusiastic to put in their views quickly, and they are loud and they want to speak it out. Having the last say also helps you come across as someone who's extremely wise, who had the patience to listen in all that conversations that went on, and kind of giving the most wise view, like a granddad towards the very end.
Yes.
That depth of voice.
Yes, that wisdom.
Correct. So being able to say less conveys so much more.
That's true.
Yeah.
Less is more. Less is more.
Yeah.
Less is more sometimes. Well, less is more sometimes. So, I have. There's something, yeah. Never start moving your own lips and teeth before the subordinates. Do. The longer I kept quiet, the longer I kept quiet, the sooner others moved their lips and teeth. As they move their lips and teeth, I can thereby understand their real intentions. If the sovereign is not mysterious, the ministers will find opportunity to take and take. So, the more you restrain yourself from speaking and going on and on and on, it forces others to speak. To the point of, and again, this is like if you're in whatever setting you're in, but you want to appear wise, you know, don't just go blabbing, you know, allow others the floor, as we would say, allow them the floor to speak, you know, and to get into things.
And silence happens to be such a rare skill that most people get uncomfortable when they're encountered with it. So if you are someone who can master silence in a public space, especially in a place where people are just talking a lot to each other, and you can sit still without your phone, without, say, any kind of engagement, without any kind of distraction. Just sit still and quiet and just observe. I think that's something that's a beautiful skill to have.
Mm-hmm.
And that will make you extremely powerful
Mm-hmm.
in a place where there's a people dynamic going on.
Interesting.
Because 80 to 90% of people cannot and do not have that skill.
They always have to be saying something and listening to something and you know, I mean, in the age of everything, listen, the attention span is shrinking.
Yeah.
It's shrinking. I don't remember now. I think they said now it's less than a goldfish, based on studies. That's the average human being right now. The attention span, less than a goldfish.
Correct. And I'm not saying that your attention span has to be 100%.
No.
It just
doesn't
needs to be like 10% better, and then you will shine.
Exactly.
It's so easy to succeed in today's day and age. I would like to interject another book over here. There was a book by Susan Cain called Quiet. And it is a book about introverts in a world that can't stop talking. That's how she puts it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a book that people should definitely look into. If they're looking into a book like this, I think that's
Another good book
that
too.
they could really understand these two laws
Mhm.
about law 3 and law 4,
Mm-hmm.
about how speaking and about expressing yourself and how to express yourself in today's world.
Awesome. All right. We are going to skip to law number 24 because law 24 is, you know, as you perfectly said, you know, kind of sum up, you know, the book. But we're going to do law 24 and 25.
Yeah.
Law number 24, play the perfect courtier. The perfect courtier thrives in a world where everything revolves around power and political dexterity. He has mastered the art of indirection. He flatters, yields to superiors, and asserts power over others in the most oblique and graceful manner. Learn and apply the laws of courtship, and there will be no limit to how far you can rise in the court. Beautiful law. Talk to me.
I think anytime that a person talks to me about this book, or if I were to recommend this book to someone, this is what I say to them. Go to your library, maybe go to your nearby bookstore, or maybe if you're checking it out online, try and read Law 24 first. Because while obviously a lot of people prefer starting out from the first page, I think Law 24 beautifully captures the essence of this book in just a couple of pages. Right? We talked about this. How did Robert Greene come about to write about this book? He went back to history books, he went back to great pieces like Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. He went on to understand how Napoleon or Louis IV or so many of those historical figures.
I mean, even in one of the laws I saw where he quoted an entire piece of the Bible, you know, with Jehu, you know, and conquering the king and all of that. Yeah.
Correct.
He went back.
All the historical references, all the literature that has inspired the human civilization, all these things, right? Playing the perfect courtier is the essence of this entire book. because that's what it's teaching you to do. You have to realize that this world, much like the world in the past, back in the 15th, the 16th, the 17th century, is a code. And you have a designated king. Even in your atmosphere, say if you're working at an organization, you have a designated king, don't you? You have the CEO. I'm not saying he's irreplaceable,
Right.
much like a king would not be either, right? But he or she holds an amount of power which is not something that you can necessarily deal with, right? Or let's just say it's not something that you can be in conflict with.
Right.
So you're going to state that, okay, he or she is the CEO, but I do need to find my way up the ranks, right? There are ranks out in the open. There are positions that I can perhaps attain. And in order to get there, I have to deal with so many more courtiers that are waiting in line to bounce on that one position. Especially in the large organizations.
Yes.
I think it exists more so in larger organizations. And so you have to be subtle in how you play the game. You do have to play by some unsaid rules, which are very clearly laid out in this book.
Yes.
Right? And you need to respect the players,
Yeah.
your adversaries, so to speak.
So I'm going to read them. The laws of court politics. Avoid ostentation. Yes, never go on and prattle on about yourself or call too much attention to your actions. The more you talk about your deeds, the more suspicion you cause. Second one, practice nonchalance. Never seem to be working too hard. Your talent must appear to flow naturally, with an ease that makes people take you for a genius rather than a workaholic. Be frugal with flattery. I learned something years ago, like when I was a child, from this movie, and I never ever forgot it. I don't know. I was a preteen, way young, when somebody killed an enemy and said to the enemy, "Never trust a flatterer." And that thing stuck with me because leading up to the death of that person, the person who killed him always sang his praises and everything. And when he stuck the knife into him and he ringed it, it's like, never trust a flatterer. So that thing stuck with me. So practice nonchalance, be frugal with flattery, arrange to be noticed. There is a paradox. You cannot display yourself too brazenly, yet you must also get yourself noticed. I want to pause here. There's a saying that I always tell people these days. You can only be noticed if you're seen. Nobody will know who you are if they don't know who you are. How can you strike that balance to not displaying yourself too brazenly, but still get noticed? How do we do something like that?
Yeah, I think in the beginning what you said, that the fact that you have to practice nonchalance and
The ease.
ease of it, right? It takes me back to a Japanese proverb, and you know this, right? The nail that sticks out against the rest is the first to be hit by the hammer, right? That's always true.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be jutting out too publicly when there are people involved, when there is a dynamic or a corporate dynamic involved. But at the same time, you cannot go unseen. I think that's a problem that quite a few of us face, right? Sometimes in our work environment, we get forgotten in a sense. And yes, you were right in saying that it's your responsibility to be seen. No one's gonna, is gonna root for you per se. So yes, it's a balance that you have to strike.
Very delicate.
And your public appearances, your the times when you are, say, put on the dais or in front of everyone, has to be extremely planned. And only then, and you need to control. Like for example, you have this presentation, right? Now that's something where it is understood that you'll be taking up the control and you'll be taking up the dais and you'll be speaking in front of people. So make sure that you have utmost control on that particular circumstance. And I'm sure you can also add into this that if you have a presentation at a certain place, make sure you're there a day before to understand how the environment works, to understand the logistics of it, to understand the acoustics of that place, to understand what people will see, sit in their places, see what they would see, and understand that this is how I need to perform tomorrow. I think control the environment beautifully. And then by the time you're in the presentation, I think be as subtle about it as you can. Capture the audience, do the job. But you don't need to make a thing of your public experience each time you're in the audience. You don't need to be the one always putting your hand up, always showing up. I don't mean showing up, but more so, you don't want to be loud each time in a public setting.
Absolutely. And as someone who does, these different workshops and speaking engagement, especially if it's a conference that I'm going to be, either doing a keynote for over a period of time, that it's being held, I always like to go in early so that I know my audience in person.
Right.
And therefore, I will know how to tailor, what I say, how I say it, the things that I would include, the activities that I would want to use, the examples that I would want to use. Can you imagine showing up to a conference about something, anything, and offending the people because you did not know who your audience is? So I love that point that you made. Prepare. You are in control of that. So prepare for that. Another thing that I like about this, and I'm going to be reading it, never be the bearer
of bad news.
Yes. How?
Always find a scapegoat. Always find a scapegoat. You do not want to be the person acknowledging the shortcoming. Or say if you're working in a group, right, and you're supposed to present, you always work in groups, you work in teams, you work in departments, right? Make sure someone can carry the bad news for you, especially if there's a failure.
Jeez.
Right?
Jeez.
Now this is where the silver lining sets in to the good and the bad and the ugly, right, with this book. But this is something that you have to, and this is also ties in to a law that we were going to speak about earlier, which is Law 5.
Yes.
About your reputation.
About the reputation, yes.
Not being the bearer of bad news for an extended period of time can really, really go long in helping your reputation grow in an organization.
Yes.
And to be very fair, let me be candid about this. There are always scapegoats in a team that you can pick. They could be your pets, the people that you favor unjustly so. They could be friends, quite often. Friends are often used as scapegoats. There could be the new joinees, the interns, who are willing to do anything and everything necessary to make a mark. Give it to them.
To bear the bad news.
Yeah.
The king kills the messenger who brings the bad news. When I read this, it so happened that while I was reading this, I was watching this movie, and the guy brought bad news to his boss. I think it was one of the Fast and Furious movies.
Right.
And he just took up a thing from his desk and he just killed the guy right there. I'm like, but he was such a loyal individual to you in your organization. He did not do anything wrong. He just brought that bad news, and it cemented this information here.
And the way that it works in the real world, you're absolutely right in saying, that's how it's depicted in the movies, but that's the symbolism of it.
Yes,
right?
it is.
In the real world, what happens is it's actually a very subconscious thing, and I love this rule because of it. Be the bearer of bad news enough number of times, they're gonna, and while you're saying the truth, right? While you're admitting the truth that these are the shortcomings that we face, and this is why we have not been able to make the target. Let's just say that
that's the
right? let's just say that's the situation at hand. But if you're going to do this again and again, again and again, say the truth too many times, especially about failure, or especially about shortcoming, despite the fact that the team has succeeded as a whole, you're going to be looked at as one of those people who is never going to make it to success. Make a project, take it to success. And this is a very subconscious thing that Robert Greene is talking about.
And you're right in saying that, because then your boss is not going to give you the project.
Yeah.
Because if you're the one always coming with, oh, it's not working because, oh, we failed because, oh, we're not working because, there is at some point, the boss is going to be like, okay, why, I don't even want to see this person coming to me at all. Very, very good. There's another one. Never criticize those above you directly. Never affect friendliness and intimacy with your master. Be frugal in asking those above you for favors. Never joke about appearances or taste. Do not be the court cynic, to tie into the bearer of bad news.
Yeah.
Be self-observant. Master your emotions. Fit the spirit of the times. And be a source of pleasure. All of these that I just read, the laws of court politics.
Yeah.
Wow.
They beautifully put across. And despite what the laws look like, they seem a bit too frank. But as you learn them, as you imbibe the examples, the various historical examples, I think you understand where they're coming from. And the negativity of it is kind of rooted out.
Yeah.
You realize that this is a necessary tool for survival.
Yes.
Right? And you fight for survival. That's
You fight for survival every day.
I'm not saying that that's good or bad, but that's fair. Yeah.
I mean, as I said, and as we've been saying, we're not saying that you're going to, hey, I'm going to live by every word. You need to make your own judgment.
Okay.
Because there are truths to these laws.
They're very instinctive.
Yeah.
To these laws.
Very.
You know this by the time
Exactly.
you think about this, you're like, oh, I know this.
Yeah.
Oh,
You know that you're not supposed to overshare certain things. You know that the person who just keeps flattering you. At some point you'll be like, okay, what's really going on here?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean, especially if they never did it before. And then all of a sudden, you're the best thing since sliced bread. That's what we say in Jamaica, right? Law number 25. Recreate yourself. And this is the law that we're ending on. Do not accept the roles that society foists on you. Recreate yourself by forging a new identity, one that commands attention and never bores the audience. Be the master of your own image rather than letting others define it for you. Incorporate dramatic devices into your public gestures and actions. Your power will be enhanced and your character will seem larger than life. This seems very contradictory for me, because in one side he's saying, do not be brazen in your appearance and all of that. And that's why I'm happy that we talked through that to say, no, there's a balance.
Yeah.
There is a balance. When you recreate yourself, because I believe in seasons of life. I believe where I was 2 years ago is definitely not who I am right now.
Yeah.
And so forth. Because we learn, we grow, our values shift, the core values stay, but then there are different values that we add. Maybe when we were younger, time was just not important because we thought that we would live forever. right? And we will be forever young and not fighting grays and all of that. But as we move through life, there are certain things that we now value. We value time a little bit more. We value family a little bit more. We value our alone time a little bit more. Whereas when we were younger, we just want to be out. We want to be out. The only time we want to come in is to sleep.
Yeah.
What do you say?
I think the Law 25, recreate yourself. By the time you reach this chapter, this is exactly
Halfway through
you
the
already
book.
finished half the book.
Yes.
You realize that this book now kind of delves into more than just the laws to keep you happy, saying people down. What it's saying there is so much more important than everything else in the book.
Yeah.
Right? It's giving you a chance. It's not only giving you a chance, it's giving you a command to recreate yourself. And what you have to understand when you recreate yourself is that no, that doesn't mean that you're going to cut off roots. It means that you're going to develop on what you have already developed so far. And it is psychologically true that we play different personas in different areas of our life. Right? You play a different role when you're with your family, when you're a father, when you are a son, you play a very different role. Whereas when you are, say, an office dynamic, or when you're with your friends, you're playing different roles. And all these roles are brewing or rather coming out of you, right? So they are a part of you. You can have 6 different personas. I'm not saying you should be conflicted between them, but you're comfortable playing these different personas and whatever is necessary in that environment with those people. So when you say recreate yourself, it's giving you a chance to recreate yourself in the public atmosphere, in the atmosphere where it counts, where it's challenging. You're not supposed to exercise these laws with your family. Hopefully not, because because that's supposed to be your own family or the family that you create in the future, right? Your children, your spouse. You're not supposed to play these. Hopefully, you don't play these laws with them. You don't have to play these laws with them, but you have to play rather this in a challenging atmosphere where you need this, and that's where you will have to create a very cutting-edge persona, the one that cannot be trifled with, the one. Yes, who can be vulnerable in times when that's needed to show, but apart from that, I think it's a formidable character. It's the creation of that one formidable character that can be relied upon in times of need, in times of performance. So that's what the author here is trying to convey.
Recreate yourself. There's something I wanted to read. Know how to be all things to all men. A discreet Proteus, a scholar among scholars, a saint among saints. That is the art of winning over everyone, for like attracts like. Take note of temperaments and adapt yourself to that of each person you meet. Follow the lead of the serious and jovial in turn, changing your mood discreetly. There can really be no reversal to this critical law. Bad theater is bad theater. Even appearing natural requires art. In other words, acting. Bad acting only creates embarrassment. Of course, you should not be too dramatic. Avoid the histrionic gesture. But that is simply bad theater anyway, since it violates centuries-old dramatic laws against overacting. In essence, there is no reversal to law number 25. Recreate yourself. Nice. Wow. I'm happy that I took your advice and did not just stop at was it law number 4 or law number 3? One of them. Yeah, I'd stopped because I'm like, okay, this is a slippery slope. I'm heading down, dangerous road here, and I can see how it's going to make me become this mastermind of whatever. But pushing past it to the latter chapters, as you mentioned, chapter 24, chapter 25 especially, moving past there, you tend to now see that, these laws are not new.
Yeah.
These are not new things. These are things that existed from the Bible days, beginning to show you from the beginning of time.
Yeah.
You know, because power was around that time. You understand? And they had to know. I'm sure in Caesar's days, you had people who wanted to see his head on a spike.
And they did.
And they did. In his own court, so to speak. And I'm sure now, today, in the corporate world and in the society that we live in, we even have people in our own circles. They don't like us, but they're in our circles. Be wise. Be wise. You know, and I'm just injecting that for the just be wise. So you will have to know how to navigate, you know, these spaces where it can become quite dangerous.
But
You know,
at the same-
undercutting
Yeah.
happens. People see you and they're like, oh, Aman is always up for the promotion. Let me sink him.
Yeah.
These things happen every single day. Every single day.
You remember how every single time a new board game came to us, be it the Monopoly, be it the Game of Life, be it Scotland Yard, whatever we played, it came with kind of a manual.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You could sift through it, understand how the game works, and
Mhm.
then you start playing.
Mhm.
Right? You already had a handle of how to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
In life, however, we don't necessarily come with a manual. However, this book, I feel, is as close as you can get to a manual to life, because at the end of the day, what this existed, the entity of power existed even before humans existed. You see it in animals, you see it how they govern their life, their territories, their attributes, their behavior towards others. They have an understanding of power much better than we do. It's just that since we have surrounded ourselves and distracted ourselves with so many structures and so many rights, right? Rights and rights.
Right,
That
right.
you have the right to do this, you have the right to be yourself, whatever that is. Understandably so. But we forgot what these unsaid laws were. And this is a great reminder of coming back to our own very survival. And let's remember that life is a survival, but it's also a game. Right? It has to be played with in a very serious kind of way, because there are some, you know, the kind of prizes that are available for you to attain are real, right? So play the game and don't be played, you know.
Play the game and don't be played. Well done that. I love that. Play the game and don't be played. That's a word. That's a word right there. Thank you so much, Aman. And I look forward to many more conversations. Do not run and hide when I say
Right.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.